Okay, if councilors would take their seats, please. Okay, I would like to welcome everyone to the January 9th, 2025 Barnstable Town Council meeting. In accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 20, I must inquire whether anyone is recording this meeting, and if so, to please make your presence known. This meeting is being televised live via Xfinity Channel 8 or 1070 or High Definition Channel 1072, or may also be accessed via the Government Access Channel live stream feed on the town website. As always, written comments are welcome at council@town.barnstable.ma.us, and if you do send in written comments, they will be distributed to all town councilors. Madam Clerk, if we could have a roll call, please.
Thank you. Councilors: Bloom.
Here.
Burdick.
Present.
Clark.
Here.
Crow.
Here.
Levesque.
Here.
Ludke.
Here.
Mendez.
Here.
Neary.
Here.
Penn.
Here.
Schnapp.
Here.
Starr. Tamish.
Here.
Turkelson.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just for the record, please be advised that Councilors Bloom and Penn are attending via Zoom, and also our town attorney will be attending via Zoom. Okay. Councilor Ludke, if you could introduce our veteran for the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
Thank you, President Tamish. You can stay seated, and then we'll. Thank you, Lee. Thank you. Lee Vaughn is a proud Cape Cod Washershore who grew up in Kingston, Mass. Before finding his true home on the Cape. After completing his enlistment in the Marine Corps, he moved to Cape Cod in 1985 to continue his education at Cape Cod Community College. During this time, he worked at Bradford's Hardware and sold Encyclopedia Britannica in the Mid-Cape area, among other jobs, to support himself through college. In 1987, he realized Cape Cod was a wonderful place to live and felt it's where he truly belonged, so he purchased his home on C Street. It was here that he began his family, with a beautiful white picket fence marking the start of a new chapter in his life. His service with the Marine Corps Reserves Unit, the Cape Cod's first of the 25th Marines, called him away to fight in the Gulf War, where he served for a year before returning to the Cape. Upon his return, he opened his first store, the Import Outlet on Main Street, Hyannis. The business flourished, eventually expanding to 4 locations across the region over 12 profitable years. Seeking a change, he transitioned to a new career, starting a painting and remodeling business. He loved this work deeply as it allowed him to collaborate with skilled craftsmen and restore some of Cape Cod's most beautiful homes. Today, Lee and his wife co-publish Bonavite, a Cape Cod magazine celebrating both local American and Brazilian cultures. Written in English and Portuguese, the magazine covers a variety of topics such as Cape Cod living, events, recipes, and a special focus on American traditions, holidays, and food. They are passionate about sharing the spirit of Cape Cod and making newcomers feel at home on this beautiful, unique piece of the world. Let's welcome Lee Vaughn, our Marine veteran, tonight to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand.
Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag.
Lee, get on the other side. Go to the microphone.
Okay.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. If you could remain standing, please, for a moment of silence. Today, we're going to dedicate our moment of silence in honor of our 39th President, Jimmy Carter, whose funeral was in Washington, D.C. today, and Joan Betnick Smith, a Cotuit resident in the 1970s. Joan celebrated her 100th birthday this past July. Dr. Betnick Smith has had a career in education, eventually teaching at Cape Cod Community College, the Elmer Willard School in New York, and Mount Holyoke College. She represented the town of Barnstable on the Cape Cod Regional Technical High School Board for over 41 years and actively gave her time and treasure to the Barnstable Public Schools. She was a founding member of the Cape Cod Collaborative. Dr. Joan Betnick Smith was very proud of her lifetime contributions to her Cape Cod community and for the betterment of children. Councilor Clark, Vice President Clark.
Thank you very much, President Tamish. On behalf of Councilor Starr, I'm reading, "We are sad to announce the passing of Ted Theodoris from Barnstable Village. He was the founder of Friends of Barnstable Harbor and the inspiration for the work they carry on today. After a 30-foot section of the bulkhead collapsed into Barnstable Harbor in March 2008, Ted rallied local residents and spearheaded the formation of a nonprofit group to ensure that the harbor was rebuilt quickly and completely. He galvanized town and state officials with his dogged pursuit of funding options and was ultimately successful in helping to procure over $5 million, with the state contributing 3/4 of the total. Once the bulkhead repairs were completed, Ted worked to give the Friends of Barnstable Harbor a strong strategic foundation and ensured the Friends remained an important voice in the management of the harbor. Ted's achievements in Barnstable were only a single chapter in an extremely accomplished life. He will be missed by many in the village."
Thank you. Thank you very much. You may be seated. Okay. We will now open up public comment. Public is invited to address the council either in person or via Zoom. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Okay. Good evening. My name's Lori Crawley, and I'm from the town of Hyannis. So I just came quickly because I noticed this morning the meeting was tonight about the development at the Marston's Mill site. And so basically, I've just come. I do have questions, and I know you don't answer those during comments, but I did leave my email. So if anyone could get back to me with some answers, that would be wonderful. So my questions are, when looking at this whole development and the 3 different plans, I can tell you I'm against recreational only, right up front. And I would like to know where the data, how I can seek out the data that was done for this project. You know, what's very interesting to me is how the collection was done of this data, the collection tools used, the questions that were asked, as well as the participants that answered. So like, you know, geographical, demographic, race, ethnicity, age, where they live, AGI, all that is important when collecting data to make these decisions. So I really would like to look at the data around this, because when I look at some of the fields and see them empty, I'm just wondering how we need so much more recreational fields and stuff. So I'm totally interested in the data that was collected to make some of these decisions, and then, or offerings, whatever. And then I can tell you, obviously, I am for more housing. I have 4 adult children, and none of them can afford anything here. So more housing for me is interesting, and I would definitely be for housing there. And one of the things I would like to know, and I know there was a housing committee. I remember seeing you at the interviews. And that's my question, where are they in this process? Are they part of this process? Because I don't know. So I'd like to know if they are part of the process. If they are not, why are they not? Because I thought that's part of their role. And so maybe I am ignorant in not knowing their role and why, what their process is. So that's kind of all I needed to say. And I really look forward to seeing that data. And I'd really like to know the role of that housing committee and where their role is in these decisions. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
I'm Owen Fletcher, and I am a resident of the village of Osterville. At least that's what the post office thinks. I live north of 28, so maybe it's the Mills. I think there's a little rock that says Osterville Heights by me. I don't know. Anyways,
It's one of those questions that's never been answered.
resident of the town of Barnstable as
You go.
well.
Good enough.
So, try to be brief. Decent, affordable homes, they're the foundations for people's lives in Barnstable. And for too many years, the lack of attainable homes has undermined those foundations. So we really need all of you as town councilors to really consider hard about supporting constructing homes on town-owned property so that everybody has a firm footing to build a good life. I washed ashore here about a decade ago with my family. We rented a house in Osterville that we could barely afford with 3 adult incomes. Unfortunately, my ex-wife and I separated, and I couldn't find a place to live in town. I wound up in a basement in Sandwich with my kids' bunk beds in my bedroom. I wound up in a house, a garage apartment over a garage in Yarmouthport. And I would have loved to live closer to my kids. I drove to pick them up and drive them to school and be around them. And it's really hard to be healthy when you're scared that you're going to lose your life here because you can't find a place to stay. I was lucky enough to remarry a wonderful woman and live in a house on Pitcher's Way in Hyannis. And we used that house to buy a nice house in Osterville, which I'm fortunate enough to live in now. My ex-wife works at Barnstable High School. My wife works for the town. Myself, I work for the county and work in Barnstable Village. I couldn't do any of that today. I couldn't find the same place to live. I couldn't buy the house that we bought. You just couldn't do it. So, if we're going to have a balanced, thriving community, we need more homes for year-round workers and residents. So, decent, affordable homes support our mental and physical health. When our well-being is supported, we're able to thrive in our work and contribute more to our society and our economy. So I don't have any of the answers. I mean, I hope as we try to find them all together, we can give each other the benefit of the doubt. If people try to build housing the street over from me or more homes, I would be nervous and I'd hope I'd do the right thing, but I don't have that with this particular project. So people's emotions are heartfelt, but I do want people to consider, and I hope people give each other the benefit of the doubt as they come out and say they want more housing or maybe they don't want any at all. But what I would like to ask everybody, including all of you, is if we're not going to build the housing in places like this near Village Center, where are we going to build them? And if you want to build them elsewhere, are you going to come out and support building them elsewhere when people there are just as anxious about them being built in their backyard as the people who are but this property are? So that's all I want to say this evening. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hi, how you doing today? Eric Schwab from Hyannis. I have some of the data about what the town collected regarding the Mills property. More people want public restrooms than ADUs. More people want a playground than single-family housing. This is data that was collected by the town and published by Planning and Development. A majority of folks want a combination of parking and walking trails and open space. So if you don't like the data, at some point, you should just say so. I mean, you shouldn't just keep holding more meetings until the data changes, because people get exhausted from coming to the meetings. So the data is pretty clear. Regarding Mr. Fletcher's comment, which I think is important, that area needs a master plan. There's an enormous amount of buildable land in that area, and no one really knows who will accept what where, because the town's never taken the time to inventory all of the land that is potentially available. So I'd recommend you just take a little step back, just look at what's out there, pull it together into something coherent, and present that, rather than just saying, we're going to build on this property because we own it. Look around. Get an idea of the whole picture. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Catherine Clark, and I'm here not only as a representative of Housing Assistance Corporation, but also a current resident of the town of Barnstable. I am in favor of exploring housing opportunities at the Marston's Mill School property. My husband and I, we currently rent our home in Katuitt. We love the community, and I know from firsthand experience how difficult it is to find safe, stable housing here on the Cape, and purchasing housing here on the Cape. As a local that grew up here, this is my hometown. It's our dream to really put down roots and to live here. We invest in the community. We love living here. And we're losing too many essential workers. And as an employee of Housing Assistance, I am fully aware of the state of the housing crisis. We are losing 850 households just last year, to be exact, who made under $100,000. They were leaving the Cape. And this is because they can't afford to live here. And we need them to stay here. We need to find them housing. I urge you to keep this door open so we can explore housing opportunities at the Marston's Mill School property that enhances the community and saves our locals. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Lynn Rhodes. I am the president of the Cape Cod branch of the NAACP. I'm also the treasurer for the Zion Union Heritage Museum. I am also, in the next 3 weeks or so, about to be a homeowner in Falmouth
Congratulations.
of a house I was born in.
Wow.
If my dad didn't own this house, it wouldn't be possible. I've worked for the state for 15 years. I am on the higher end of being paid, and it has been very creatively financing this endeavor. I speak to you as a person who is to be a new homeowner, but also someone who needs housing. We need housing. We need, more importantly, affordable housing. I hope you keep the word affordable for the people in this community who are trying to stay here. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Lynn, do we have anyone on Zoom? Oh.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Carolyn Pickman. I am a homeowner in Marston's Mills. I am a longtime resident of Cape Cod, from Truro to Barnstable to Yarmouthport to now Marston's Mills. I am an abutter to the property that we are addressing tonight. My house is right next door to the church. I've been to all of our meetings, and I thank you for holding these meetings and for listening to us. And I feel it's now time that we have to listen to you to try to understand what you are all thinking about. I appreciate the email that was sent out on the 3 options. And I'd like to just quickly address those options. I believe and I feel that you have been listening to our in-person meetings by these three options that are out there. And I'd like to address the idea of the buffer zones that I see that are put in there to help with our privacy and to protect some of the natural beauty of the land on these designs. I'm very much in favor of these, and I thank you for considering those and putting them in for us. I'd like to take that a step further and try to discuss and find out how we might discuss putting those buffer zones into conservation land or land trust properties. This is not something that I know how to do, but I would love to be directed in some area of getting those buffer zones untouchable for playgrounds or fields or additional homes or anything like that, and keeping those buffer grounds sacred Cape Cod ground. So maybe I should put my name down for anybody who can help guide in talking to conservation about those buffer zones. I think that that's pretty much all. Building new homes is not the only way out of this predicament that we are in right now of unaffordable housing. Building is not going to get people enough money to buy these homes that are being projected here. I think it's a deeper problem. I think that we have income inequality in our time, and it's very difficult for people for the prices that are on Cape Cod for homes. I bought a few homes myself on Cape Cod, and I own the home that I live in Marston's Mills, and I speak from that experience.
Right.
So
Could you sign in, please?
I will. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Angela Versa. I am also in a butter of the elementary property. I lived in my home there for 20 years. I've been on the Cape for 30, so hopefully I'm not considered a wash ashore anymore. We have an extraordinary opportunity in the middle of our village to create something incredibly beautiful on that property. Just imagine yourself in a park for people of all ages to come and have paved trails, to walk, jog, bike, stroll babies, teach children how to ride their bikes. It's a beautiful flat property that could be used wonderfully. Also dogs, so many animals come and just love to play, and their owners. The open space would also be a beautiful place to have a covered pavilion, picnic tables, grills, gatherings of family and friends to celebrate in open space, play ball, fly a kite. Also a place that you don't need a permit to go to. Beaches, you have to have a permit. Also space for music, to bring events of packing a picnic, having food trucks, sit on the lawn, enjoy, dance. Movies, big screens for gatherings of families. Of course, farmers markets, craft shows, community garden, bringing people together. Even a community center to teach the arts, the music, the dance, to express themselves, to bring smiles and laughter. There will be no need to have a connection from 28 to Main Street. That will save a lot of dollars, as we know. I'm sure there are other opportunities for housing. I'm not going to go down that road, but I'm asking for all of you to please consider those options. I am in no way against any housing. It all can be done. This property is a gift. It could be our Central Park. How awesome would that be? It's a special piece of property in the middle of our village. On the Cape, where people come to live, vacation, from overdeveloped places. Route 28 is a main road. It's our South Highway. We've got 3, 28, 6, and 6A. Why would we put something there that is not appealing to the eye? Let's keep the charm, the serenity, and the beauty in the community. I hope we all share the same values. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is April Croker, and I live in Marston's Mills, near to this property. Thank you for letting me speak tonight. Just going to read from my phone here. Okay, so I'm extremely involved in our village, from planning and hosting community connection events and activities to all sorts of other volunteer work. So I'm very familiar with the community and the people in the community. I've had the opportunity to talk to many people in this neighborhood and on this street. In fact, I've spent about 20 hours walking up and down the street and in and out of that neighborhood, speaking to people individually, asking them, sitting in their on their porches, on their steps, building furniture with them, and asking them, what do you want to see here and why? So I believe that I do have a really good grasp on the picture of what people want here. And I have also created 3 petitions that have gone out, and the petitions are all against housing in this location. They're all for recreation only, and I'll send those to your mailboxes. So yes, they're in favor of recreation. And it's not that anyone on this list has said to me, and I know that I am not against housing in general, it's just the actual location that we're talking about here, as it is in the heart of our village, and this is a historical neighborhood, it's a historical piece of property, and we really want to preserve, as people have said, the charm and the history and the culture of this neighborhood. So those of us who do not want to see housing in this location are not a bunch of people who are anti-housing or anything like that. We know there are other options. We know that you guys know there are other options, and we're just asking you to consider those more seriously than this piece of land, of which many of us have come out to meeting after meeting and opposed a project of building homes there. And lastly, I just want to say that, you know, there's a lot of us who work really hard to preserve the culture and the community that we have there. And the history and the story of Marston's Mills is really important to us. And we want our counselors to be a part of that history in a positive way. So we want our counselors to be able to say, and to be known in our community as people who have come out, listened to the people, heard us, and did the right thing by us, instead of just doing whatever they wanted to do, instead of maybe concentrating on a pet project or just housing. We really want people to consider that we know that this is not the only option. So why is there such a push, a very constant push on the community to put it there when it really doesn't have to be there? Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Rob Brennan. I'm a resident of Osterville. I'm also the Chief Legal Officer for Housing Assistance. So both my, as I think most folks know, my passion is housing. My day job is meeting the Cape's unmet housing needs. And I had a great plan here tonight. I thought I was going to be able to come up here and say, I agree with Eric Schwab, because Eric Schwab posted a really insightful image online. So I'm going to say it anyway. I agree with the imagery that Eric Schwab posted, and that was this image. It's the Petaluma Petaluma co-housing, and it's in California. And it's an example of the kind of creative housing development where we can have it all. We can address all the concerns that have been expressed for community fabric and history. We can meet the housing needs. And just to put a finer point on some of the comments that my colleague Catherine Clark brought up, nationally, average housing price is $360,000. Here on Cape Cod, the median price is $750,000. To meet that median housing price, you need to have a household income of $220,000. The median household income on Cape Cod, as you probably know, is $89,000. So that is the housing gulf that exists between what is being developed and what the means are. And that is why we're losing the families that we're losing. That's why we're hearing from parents whose adult children who can't afford homes here. But there is an opportunity, and if I were to tell you that we can develop cottage-scale homes forming a neighborhood defined by its community fabric, that we can create housing opportunities for seniors, young families, town employees, educators, first responders, and all other demographics that we're losing for lack of ownership opportunities. And if I told you that the town of Barnstable could get paid by the Commonwealth to do exactly that, I hope that that would grab your interest. In fact, that opportunity exists. It's existed for the past 2 years under a program called Chapter 40Y that you may not be familiar with. It's not been done yet in the state. The regulations, are still being promulgated. But to give you a couple highlights, it promotes development of single-family starter homes, defined as homes less than 1,850 square feet. It's adopted locally by a simple majority. The town gets paid by the state simply for adopting the overlay district based on the hypothetical yield. The town gets paid again for every building permit that's issued within the district. The district requires a density of no fewer than 4 units per acre. So we're talking about cottage scale development on modest lots. And that's a history that we've seen here. It was in the Petaluma co-housing that Eric posted online. That image is posted alongside of something called the Greenwood Ave cottages that were done by Ross Chapin out in Seattle. An example here on the Cape that I was involved with is in Dennisport, called Heritage Sands. This was developed at 8 units per acre. And what happens when we develop at densities like that is we're dropping the price of the land, and we're increasing the affordability. These are projects that can be developed by nonprofits. They're projects that can be further supported by towns, putting even greater affordability restrictions. Under the Chapter 40Y program, and this is important, it's designed to meet that missing middle. So there is an affordability requirement, but it's only 10% of the units at 110% of AMI. What difference does that make? That makes it so that our teachers, our first responders, our hospital workers, our folks that we rely upon, throughout the year, but still are lost within that giant housing gap, that they can afford this. Whereas under traditional, at 80% AMI, 60% AMI, they earn too much. So it's very much directed at exactly that missing middle. And it's an ownership opportunity, and it allows for the creation of, again, intense community fabric, award-winning community fabric. So this is an opportunity where we can set aside recreational space, we can cluster development, we can have the kind of pavilions, that are being described. So my ask is just to keep open, the options here, to look at 40Y, and as this progresses, that might be considered an option that you might want to put into the RFP. So again, anyone who's interested in learning more about 40Y, I'd be happy to meet with folks. I've met with Councilor Schnepp, Councilor Levesque, and I hope you'll consider it as an option that could be right for this site, for Marston's Mills, and for Barnstable. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, anyone else?
Our first speaker is Samantha Leonard.
Go ahead.
One moment, Samantha.
We're going to go ahead with the Zoom one first, okay?
Samantha, you may unmute. You have 3 minutes.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Samantha Leonard, and I am a resident of Marston's Mills, born and raised, and I'm also a local business owner. Tonight, you are being presented scenarios based on the community meetings that I've attended, and I'd like to refocus the attention on a previously raised issue, the need for a new library in Marston's Mills. If you haven't visited the current library, I encourage you to do so. The building is outdated and no longer meets the needs of our growing community. Marston's Mills is home to the largest elementary school in the district, the BUES building, and burgeoning population of multi-generational families. Libraries are vital community resources, and Marston's Mills is sorely lacking in this regard. I envision a new community library with open space that could serve as a hub for residents of all ages. It could offer spaces for babies and toddlers to interact, support groups for new parents, craft and game areas for elementary school children, internet and research access for middle schoolers, college and career preparation classes for high school students, book clubs for working parents, a test kitchen for cooking classes, an outdoor gazebo for afternoon music, additional features like a playground, splash pad, walking trails and workout stations, a farmer's market, and outdoor yoga classes could also be incorporated. While I'm aware of the housing shortage, I believe that investing in community resources like these will benefit families for generations to come. As Eric Klinberg writes in Palaces for the People, How to Build a More Equal and United Society, too often we take for granted and neglect our libraries, parks, markets, schools, playgrounds, gardens, and communal spaces. But decades of research now show that these places can have extraordinary effect on our personal and collective well-being. Why? Because wherever people cross paths and linger, wherever we gather informally, strike up a conversation and get to know one another, relationships blossom and communities emerge. And where communities are strong, people are safer and healthier, crime drops, and commerce thrives, and peace, tolerance, and stability take root. I hope that you will consider this proposal and its potential to revitalize Marston's Mills. Thank you.
For the record, I'd like to also state that Council Starr has joined the meeting on Zoom. Would you like to speak? Great.
Hi, my name is Brian Croker. I've lived in Marston's Mills for about 20 years, been on the Cape 45 years. I've seen the population of the Cape grow a lot in the last 45 years. And, you know, it's an expensive place to live, and it's, you know, we like most people, we always buy a house we can't afford. But we, you know, worked hard to afford a place in Marston's Mills. And, you know, we liked the farm type community that was there, the village. Our neighbors who live behind us, they sold about 40 acres, and they put in their deed that only one house could be built in 50 years. I think they understood what the village meant to the people around it. I know housing is tough on Cape. It's expensive. It seems like any of the cottages all get bought up by, you know, corporations or people who rent them out, weekly rentals, and they're taking that away from people that could have a family and live here. I don't know if there's any way to incentivize people to sell to year-round people instead of to the summer, where they turn, you know, regular family homes into vacation rental homes. That's always a problem. You see all the vacancies in the wintertime, houses sitting empty that could be year-round, filling up a housing need. But yeah, I know the population of the Cape is growing. But yeah, I like to keep Marston's Mills like it is. I don't know how much more population we can make the Cape, or how much, you know, I would hate to see it turn into more of a city with a dense population, traffic. You know, there's already, you know, waiting to get doctor's visits or grocery stores, and I know other natural resources that I don't know how much the Cape can supply, but a lot of issues I see with more housing, but I don't know, that's my thoughts of keeping Marston's Mills like it is. So, that was it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, any further public comment? Ms. Poyant?
Our next speaker is Samantha Fitzgerald. Samantha, you may unmute. You have 3 minutes.
Is it actually Sandy Fitzgerald?
Yes, go ahead, sorry.
Okay. Thank you for allowing me to speak this evening. I live in Centerville, but many of you do not know this. For over 12 years, I worked at 1965 Main Street, Marston's Mills. The owner and I, the property was bought, the old Barry property, and we opened a flower farm. We had 5 greenhouses there. They're still there to this day. When the flower farm was created, the neighbors were upset. They thought that we would be changing the landscape of the neighborhood. But instead, what we did is the antique home was on Main Street. We installed plants and buffers, and we had the greenhouses on the Route 28 side, and it worked out perfectly. If you drive down Main Street, Marston's Mills, you would never know what is on the backside of 28. So as I say that, the Route 28 section is a very busy stretch, and at the Marston's Mills school location has 2 access points. There's 14 acres that have been paid by the taxpayers, basically, and it only seems fair that the taxpayers or the residents should maybe take a vote. The town of Barnstable, take a vote on this property, because it's a beautiful property, and it really fits the bill for housing. And I hate to say that. I think that the parcel should be maximized for housing and a playground. It's on the bus stop. It's less than a mile to the banks, the pharmacies, the grocery stores, gas stations, restaurants, and it's ideal. Now, not to mention 3 parcels down, 3640 Route 28, Avangrid will be donating 14 acres to the village of Marston's Mills, and this land will be deemed open space, and it's around Mill Pond, which actually abuts additional conservation land owned by the town of Barnstable. If you back up to where our flower farm was at the intersection of Main Street, 28 and South County, the backside of the old the Cranberry Farm right there, right on 28, the town of Barnstable owns almost 30 acres of conservation land, and then there's another 58 acres of conservation land right there. So when I look at Marston's Mills, I have a plot in the community gardens. Marston's Mills has a Wheeler Road Reserve, the Wheeler Road Holly Reserve. They have beautiful Burgess House, the conservation at Long Pond, 600 acres over near the airport. It's ideal for housing because there is a lot of open space already in the town. And what I don't understand about recreation is I live in Centerville, less than 4 miles from the Marston's Mills property to the Centerville Elementary School, the old elementary school, the playground property, the rec center. We will be tearing out a ball field, but there's a proposal to install a ball field over in Marston's Mills. It really seems kind of like a waste of money. And as the neighbors are upset, I understand affordable housing. A friend of mine, his son was sworn into the Barnstable Police Department in August. They're down 20 officers. He had to purchase a home off Cape because he could not find a home here. He has a young wife with children, and it's a single income. So I don't feel like a decision needs to be made tonight. I feel like this is a Barnstable decision, the voters, whether it's through an open meeting or possibly a petition. But I feel like the residents should decide what happens with that property. And I am sensitive to the fact that the village and the fabric of the village being changed, but we did that at Sebastian Flower Farm. We did that. You had no idea the greenhouses were there until the leaves fell. And then you maybe would see our greenhouse lights at 2 o'clock in the morning. But that's all I have to say. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak this evening.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Beth Young. Beth, you have 3 minutes. You may unmute.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. Hello, my name is Beth Young. I am a 20-year resident of Marston's Mills, and I plan to be a lifelong resident of Marston Mills. While I didn't plan to speak tonight about specifically the library item that Samantha brought up, I agree with her wholeheartedly. I'm a user of the library, and unfortunately, our library is probably the worst of the 7 villages of the town. Unfortunately, it's just because it's one of the oldest. But that would be a wonderful upgrade to this property, as if we included a new library on that site. That would be wonderful. What I'd like to speak about, though, is I appreciate the proactive approach the town has taken in the 2 designs that they presented and the numerous meetings that they've had that I've participated in, most of them interactive with the town. However, I think the designs are off the mark, and I think they could be much improved. Specifically, I would like to see a pathway around the perimeter of this property. It's such a nice sized property to have a walking path, an exercise path, a paved biking trail for young children of Marston Mills, that there really is no place to get off the road and bike in Marston Mills. So around the perimeter of this property, and redistribute the housing section of the property. I think people get scared when they hear the words affordable housing. I'd much rather relabel them as starter houses. Like everyone else has spoken about, the teachers, the first responders. I have a first grader in the school system here, and at one of the recent evening events, I heard someone else saying how they moved back to the Cape with their family, and they did not intend to live with their parents long term, but they unfortunately cannot afford to live anyplace else. So if we could have starter homes, small homes, 1,000 to 1,200 square feet, I don't think it would detract from the other neighbors on the perimeter of the property if it was as what people have been talking about for teachers and first responders and such, people that are trying to start their families and remain on Cape Cod. With the housing, I'd like to see a redistribution of the housing from the model that we had, something that focuses all towards the center of this property. And the center would be where the recreation would be. Ideally, maybe a gazebo or some sort of a focal point where we could have community events. I've talked in the past about maybe farmers markets. We could have concerts. We could have any type of events that Marston Mills would like to have, a focal point. The housing can be on the perimeter surrounding everything, focusing into the recreational area. This property is special. I've talked again about this at other meetings, that it's a jewel, and I really want us to get this right. We only have one chance to get it right, so I just don't want us to rush to a choice of one of these designs I think if we took a little bit more time, we can come up with something that most of us would be happy with. Thank you for the time tonight. I appreciate my opportunity to speak.
Thank you.
There are no further speakers on Zoom.
Okay. Any further public comment in the room? Seeing none, I will close public comment. Council response to public comment. Anyone on my left? Councilor Ledke.
Thank you, President Tamish. I'm not going to speak to anyone individually. We're going to have the workshop a little bit later here. And this is the first opportunity for the council to look at this. I know many of us have attended, maybe some of us haven't attended any of the village meetings. And my hat's off to our planning and development department for going out and doing this. What I love tonight is I love the authentic voices. I love the different ideas. I've heard a lot of people talk about the notion of a park, which is something near and dear to me. It's something we don't have. I think one of the speakers talked about a place that you don't need a permit to go to. You know, and our beaches kind of have that overarching permit aspect to them. So I appreciate that. All the talk about the housing, the different ways to achieve housing, the personal stories. I really commend everybody. And the talk about data. Data is absolutely essential. Without accurate data, your decisions it just cannot be accurate. So I'm looking forward to the workshop. I'm looking forward, another speaker talked about, let's hear from the councilors. Let's hear about your thoughts on this. Why don't we? I agree with that. Let's get a discussion going. And this is, people have used the term jewel. It's absolutely a jewel in two ways in terms of, I drive down 28, I look up to it. It's beautiful, has beautiful, large trees sitting there in the middle. It's absolutely gorgeous. There's so many opportunities there. But it's also a jewel because we haven't had something like this. We haven't had a town property. We've had a lot of people doing housing developments, mostly on the larger scale. But those are private developers on private property. This is an entirely different animal. So I'm excited, and I really, really appreciate everybody coming and talking about this. And I will just say one thing. I see Rick Presby in the audience. We did have a question about the relationship of we do have a housing committee, we have an ad hoc housing committee, and then we have individual things such as this. And it deserves a better answer. It even kind of stymies us at some point. Should we wait for the committee to come forward, or do we keep moving things forward? So that's a good question for us to think about and come up with a better answer of how the interrelationship is with those ad hoc committees and the work of the town. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Levesque.
Thank you, President Tamish. I just want to thank everybody for coming to speak tonight. It's cold. And to leave your home here just after the new year, and I know it was a busy holiday season. I want to wish everybody a Happy New Year. And this is, an important conversation to have. And I sort of mirror what Councilor Lucky has said, where this isn't, it's a different opportunity. It's town-owned property. I think I was at a Marston's Mills Village Association meeting, and Rick Presby mentioned that specifically, like there's a difference here, which lends to more opportunity, more deeper discussions in regards to, and responsibility for the council to do what's best for the town of Barnstable as a whole, and specifically, Marston's Mills Village. So I appreciate everybody coming out. Just want to know, I speak, I think, for the rest of the council as well. We hear you, and this is just the beginning of what could be possible. This discussion is being talked about, is being now, so that we can have a robust conversation. The sewer pipe is coming down Route 28. It's going to be years before it actually happens, and we have to either connect anything. I will say this. Since I've been a town councilor, since November of 2017, and really started attending Marston's Mills Village Association meetings, the biggest talk on that property, and when we did the Marston's Mills Improvement Project, there was a need for parking and a desire for a year-round playground, not something on an elementary school property that can only be, used after hours. So that was something that I have been talking about with the town manager, town architect, and it actually is in the capital improvement plan booklet for the 5-year plan. So that's already there, is that the playground and some parking is already there. Is it all mapped out yet? No. But I believe that should be first and foremost before there's ever any housing built there, because if we have to wait for the sewer to, even if it was going to be something housing, I don't want to wait for the playground, quite honestly, and I think I wish it could start tomorrow, to be honest with you. So just want to put that out there. So it's in the CIP booklet, so thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else on my left? On my right? Councilor Neary.
Thank you, President Tamish, and thank you all who have spoken. This is a unique property, and as I listened to, I guess it was Angela, it was like poetry, painting that picture. It's fantastic. At the same time, though, as an employer, and I've had many employees work for me, basic human need is food insecurity, and the second is shelter insecurity. The toll of not having a roof over your head or struggling to find that safety of shelter, it's basic human stuff. And it exacts a great toll on people, mentally, socially, economically, productivity-wise. So I think this project ultimately will come down to, I hope, a balance. We can arrive at a balance that, in negotiation, I guess the best way to say it is everyone should kind of walk away not feeling terrific, but you agree, in the middle somewhere, and I hope that's what occurs here. But thank you all for your comments.
Thank you. Councilor Schnapp.
Thank you, President Panish, and I'd like to echo my fellow councilors in thanking everybody for coming out on a brutally cold evening and being very respectful and creative with your comments tonight. I know that there have been questions regarding data and some of the design decisions that have been presented so far, and I'm hopeful that during our workshop that we'll either be getting some of those answers or we can press further on some of those questions if it's available. If it's not available, we'll see if it's possible to get some additional data. I also share the sense that Councilor Neary has that this is a real opportunity to kind of bring a number of elements together. I think we have a very special village. I don't think anybody here on the dais wants to do anything that would change its character, but would enhance it. And I think that we have that opportunity. 14 acres and its placement on 28 and in the village gives us a lot of opportunities. So I hope you continue with us in this process. It is going to take a while. There hasn't been any yes or no or throw this out yet, but please be patient with us, and because we're going to be asking a lot of questions of our staff and of each other before we come to some larger conclusion. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Mendes.
Thank you, President Tamish, and thanks everybody for coming in. This project in particular means a lot to me. This is the neighborhood I grew up in. It's the neighborhood my father grew up in. It's the neighborhood my grandfather grew up in. We owned everything north of Camet Lane, to Old Falmouth, to the dump. That neighborhood has changed multiple times. When I was a kid, it was all farms. My great-grandparents, my great-uncles, my great-aunts. But things change. And unfortunately, for all of us, change is hard. Nobody ever wants building near their house. I've never had one person since I've been on this council come in and say, we want this project near my house. As myself, I never make a decision on anything until I get all the data and all the information. But this I will say. Hyannis cannot take all this building anymore. Other villages are going to have to start to take some of this on. We can't do it in Hyannis anymore. And as I said, I'm very fond of that neighborhood. We still have property in that neighborhood. I still have family in that neighborhood. But they said the same thing about the houses, the new houses built on Levels Lane. It's going to change the character of the neighborhood. It's not going to be the same. They said the same thing about Tambark. It's going to change the character of the neighborhood. It's not going to be the same. Building doesn't make a neighborhood. The people in the neighborhood make the neighborhood. And so just please keep that in mind, that we have a serious housing crisis in this town. And we can always kick the can down the road, but all it's going to do is exasperate it and make it worse. I don't know if there's one town department that's at capacity. The hospital isn't at capacity as far as labor goes. The number one reason why is housing insecurity, and people cannot afford homes. So we can't have these great neighborhoods if we have nobody to plow them. We can't have these great neighborhoods if we have no nurses at the hospital. So we have to come to a decision as a town. We have to come together as a town. We have to compromise as a town. I don't want to see any more building. As I said often, many times, I used to ride my motorcycles all through there. The Barrys, I remember the Barrys. I grew up with the Barrys. I grew up with the Youngs, with the Snells. That was my neighborhood. And my neighborhood has changed. But change isn't always bad. But we can't take our eye off the ball. We need to do something. We cannot keep on kicking the can down the road, because all it's doing is making the problem worse. So let's come together as a town and do what's right. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comment? Any comments from our counselors on Zoom? No? I want to thank all the counselors and the public for all of their comments tonight. A lot of great comments and a lot of great sentiments were expressed. One thing I just want to clarify for a couple of people. The town of Barnstable does not own any of the libraries. All of the libraries are private buildings and private organizations. The town does contribute, as I recall, roughly $2 million a year towards their maintenance and upkeep and operation. But they are private entities, and they're not town departments. So just to clarify that. Okay. Anything else? Everyone all set? Move on to town manager communications. Town manager communications, on my paperwork here, are available online. They're also available in written form. The communications for this period includes a budget calendar update, the Attorney General's Office a determination the Town Council did not violate the open meeting law regarding several complaints that have been made. The Town Manager has created a cross-departmental group to work on enforcement issues in Barnstable. There's a seasonal community update As many are aware, Barnstable is not currently designated as a seasonal community, but that is subject to change, hopefully. There are some advantages to that. The Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs has issued a notice of public hearing and draft regulations for implementing the Public Lands Preservation Act. This is a bill that was passed to assist the state in getting around, is that the proper word? Some of the Chapter 97 protections that are offered under the Constitution. An update on the Cape and Islands Bridge Coalition. You know, Sagamore Bridge is coming, the new bridge is coming, and there's a lot of planning. Mark Ells has been attending those meetings and making sure our voice is heard and that we have an opportunity to express concerns or opinions about the timing and how the town will fare during that process. Barnstable opioid abatement funds update. There's an open seat on the Affordable Housing Growth and Development Trust Fund Board, and there's also an update on the local Comprehensive Planning Committee and accessory dwelling units. So that is available online, and as I say, it is available as a written document on the website. Any questions by councilors as far as the town manager's report goes? Seeing, Councilor Schnapp. Almost saw none.
Thank you, President Tamish. I have a question on number 3, which is regarding the commencement of a cross-departmental group to work on enforcement issues. And I think it's possibly long overdue. I'm glad to see that we've created this committee. I'm curious that the planning department is not part of the working group, and I'm just wondering, because I know that maybe the focus of the enforcements are in a particular direction, but I know that within planning there's a lot of, there's conservation, so there's enforcement issues there. Is parking management under planning? Okay, so we've got that, and then there's also just all the issues regarding enforcement of regulatory agreements and special permits that I know transfer often over to inspectional services, but I'm wondering if there should be a seat at the table. So perhaps I need to have more information about the purpose of this group.
Good evening.
Town Manager Clyburn.
Good evening, Council President, Vice President, Town Councilors. Andy Clyburn, Assistant Town Manager. Yes, that was simply a Scribner's error. Jim Cufford was absolutely part of that group that was there. We actually formed the group in December. We had our first meeting this week, and there's a representative of every department that has any type of enforcement under their, and it also includes Hyannis Fire. And we will bring in, as this moves forward, any other groups as it leads us. So this was just the very first, somewhat norming, trying to identify a lot of input that we have received. It is not a committee or a subcommittee. It is an internal working group that is reporting to the town manager, and I'm going to lead it. And we're excited. I think there's a lot of low-hanging fruit. I think that we will potentially be back in front of town council on a number of occasions to address certain things, but it will take time. And I don't see this having any defined beginning or ending date. It could certainly last for a year at least, if not more.
Great. Glad to hear that.
Thank you. Oh, excuse me. Councilor Crowe?
I just want to say to Andy and good luck with this. I think this is something that we've all been waiting for quite a long time. I think the citizens are demanding it, and I appreciate that you're taking it up and doing that. I just wondered if there's any room for counselors on this committee at all, or would that be appropriate or not? And I just want to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, if I might, certainly, I will meet with any counselor at any time and take all input. But there is a defined line there, and I have talked with legal. And clearly, the enforcement is under the town manager, and it is not a committee. Please, it's not a task force. It's not a committee. It's not a subcommittee. It's an internal working group. There won't be posted minutes. There will not be videotaping of this. It is getting the folks, the boots on the ground together and trying to make positive change. But we'll always be willing to talk with you about progress. I know a number of you have emailed me directly with thoughts. I've made some commitments to a couple of you to keep you advised on certain topics, and I'll certainly do that.
Thanks, Andy. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay, moving on. Act on the minutes from the December 12th, 2024 meeting. Do I hear a motion to accept the minutes?
Second.
Motion made by Councilor Crowe, seconded by Vice President Clark. Okay, because we have a hybrid meeting that some of our councilors are on Zoom, all votes have to be roll call votes, okay? So, Madam Clerk?
Councilors Bloom,
Yes.
Burdick,
Yes.
Clark,
Yes.
Crow,
Yes.
Levesque,
Yes.
Ludke,
Yes.
Mendez,
Yes.
Neary,
Yes.
Penn,
Yes.
Schnapp,
Yes.
Starr,
Yes.
Tamish,
Yes.
Turkelson.
Yes.
13 yes.
Thank you. Okay, moving on. I would like to invite Jim Kupfer, our Director of Planning and Development, to come up and give us a workshop on the Marston's Mill School.
Excellent. Good evening, everyone. Jim Kupfer, Director of Planning and Development, here to talk about the Marston's Mills Elementary School site. I'm actually very excited to be here in front of the council discussing this matter. This is a long-standing project and a hard-fought project to work with our community and get the best out of their voices to bring to you potential concepts for discussion this evening. I will discuss the potential concepts that have been out there for a few months, as well as the process that has taken place to date and where we're going from there. But I thought it would be best if we start with a little bit of history of the site and the process that we have taken on up until now. And if it's okay with you, Mr. President, I would like to hand it off to Director of Asset Management, David Anthony, for that.
Absolutely.
Good evening, councilors. I was asked to provide some context of history for this site. Obviously, those people who know Marston's Mills probably know the history quite well. I will make note that David Martin from the Historic Society was here, and he was very helpful in helping to pull some of this information together. I was also asked to kind of provide some background as to all of the adaptive reuse that we had tried to work through, both when it was school property and town property after the building was closed, because there has been some concern that perhaps we didn't do enough as the town in order to try to find a different way to use the property when the school building was still there. It was robust, and I have the opportunity to go through that with you. As we look at the property before you, it actually is one very large parcel and two rather small parcels. You can see to the western side, there's a small tax possession parcel off of a private road. We have in the center spot an oddly shaped parcel, but one that presents a lot of open space. The wooded area to the kind of southwest of the parcel, the triangle, it has a severe drop-off with topographical challenges. It is heavily wooded. It is potentially the site for the promised pump station to support 28, so it would be way off in the corner, would not impact any of the other things that happen on the property. To the eastern side, there's another triangle. That is another parcel that was a gift to the town. There also is in that area an unused easement to the Cape and Vineyard Electric Company. It's a very small portion there that had been put in place decades ago. There are a bunch of those all over the Cape when it was intended that there would be utilities and more poles and more wires, and it was just never used. But it does still sit on the property in that area. Again, it's very close to 28. It would probably not impact any of the activities on the actual parcel. So we go back to 1818. There were 3 school buildings in Marston's Mills. The school buildings were one-room schoolhouses. They were typically also where the teachers might live. In Newtown, the Plains, and then in the village center. A one-room schoolhouse was built in 1851 at the location of the Mills Restaurant. If you're ever going by there and you're familiar with it, there was a pretty nice little school there. It eventually, though, as the village continued to grow, became too small to support all of that. In 1915, they voted to expand that school in the center of Marston's Mills. I included some enrollment numbers. In 1915, there were 48 students. Again, this is everything from the very beginning to the time when you graduated, depending on if you ever graduated. There were plenty of times where children would go and learn some basics and then return to the farms and work with their parents. By 1932, enrollment was 93. As you can see, the village was continuing to grow. And the schoolhouse had become too small, and further exasperating that, they had closed the 2 wing schools, the 2 single schools that were out on the edges, so this became the school for Marston's Mills at that time. In 1936, there was the vote at town meeting to purchase the approximate 13 to 15 acres that is the location that we are talking about today. There was included in there $25,000 to relocate the school from the center of town up to this property, and it was located very close to what is now Route 28. I was right there on the south side of the parcel. It formally opened in 1936 with 4 classrooms, a dining room, an assembly room, a kitchen in the basement, and it was considered the best school in town at that time. This is what it looked like. It looks pretty nice. In 1957, town meeting recognized that that school was no longer adequate, and they voted $420,000 to build what was the most recent Marston's Mills School. It's kind of amazing to think about how construction costs have gone up and up and up. This was a 6-classroom building for the 200 students. It had a kindergarten room, the multi-purpose hall for the cafeteria, assemblies, and gymnasium. It opened in February of 1959. This was located, for those who aren't familiar with the property, much closer to Main Street, up away from 28. So we move ahead to 2001 when the school department engaged TAM's group and the Merrimack Education Collaborative to do an enrollment study. I was working in procurement at the time and had the opportunity to do the RFP. It was one of the first major RFPs for the school that I had a chance to do. TAM's was contracted in 2002. They started to do all of their work and published a report in 2003. At the base of it, there had been an estimate that we were going to lose school population because of the changing nature of the community that we lived in. It was going to drop from about 7,200 students to about 5,500 students in 10 to 12 years. Lo and behold, that happened much quicker than anyone had anticipated. The TAMS report was updated a couple of different times as conditions started to come into play. And in 2009, there were massive changes that were made. And there was a realization that we had hit that 5,400 student range at that point. And then Superintendent Patty Grenier had to make a very tough decision. And the focus had been to close the 4 oldest elementary schools because of the greatest cost to bring those particular buildings up to current standards. So Osterville Bay, Osterville Elementary, near the Cape Cod Academy. Hyannis West was considered, but pulled back at the last time, which is why Osterville was considered to be closed. Marston's Mills and the Cotuit School. Of note, back in 2005, the old high school that's right here in Hyannis was also sold to the Diocese of Fall River. and it is currently the home of St. John Paul II High School. So in the space of less than 10 years, there were 5 major school buildings that were closed because there simply wasn't a lot of population to support them, and they were going to cost a ton of money, and it was an avoided cost in 2009 of close to $100 million of renovations that wouldn't have to be made. Many of those schools at the time, the way they were designed in the 50s, didn't meet the Department of Secondary Education standards, which required air exchange, which required a certain number of square feet for size classrooms. In some cases, access to bathrooms had to be enhanced, and it was going to cost so much in order to bring those up. So this particular school, Marston's Mills Elementary, was closed, and it was used until 2012 for the collection point for any of the surplus furniture. When you close a school and you have a whole bunch of stuff in there, what wound up happening over the course of about 18 months, 2 years, was a bad desk would get retired and a better desk from another school would get transferred in. There were a lot of things that were brought in. The school was heated, it was alarmed, it was used to store a bunch of things in this particular school, so it was maintained. There were a lot of evaluated uses that were done over time. There was one particular project that we worked on to determine whether or not to bring our school bus operations, which is a contracted ops that involves 45 full-length buses and a bunch of short buses for specific uses. We wondered if this could become the headquarters for an in-house bus and transportation service. Parking 44 buses in the middle of a village was not seen as popular, so this idea kind of came and went, but that was the use of the land, and you need about 5 acres to just park buses. Then you need the driver parking, then you need buildings to support it. We also had toyed with the idea of relocating school administration down there so that they would have a central office, which could also have training facilities, but it was considered remote, and at the time, we were really working very well with the school department because of the consolidated environment between town and school that started in 2006. So that HR was consolidated, procurement was consolidated, finance was consolidated. We didn't have these dual tracks. That consolidation continues to work quite well today. The school committee at the time in 2012 voted to declare the property surplus to school needs. In doing so, they turned over the property and the school back to the town. That's important because that's a designation that has to be done in public session, and it essentially means that the school committee is no longer responsible for the property. So it arrived back to the town, having been closed for 3 years, marginally maintained, but it had been heated. But all the challenges that had caused it to be identified in 2001 were still there. Only now they were 9 years older when it was closed, and then 3 more years older, and there really hadn't been a lot of investment in it because of good money going into a building that didn't really have that purpose moving forward. In 2014, the schools had looked into doing some early education, some preschool programs. They hired a consultant who came in. Eventually, they decided on the Enoch Cobb Center, which is here in Hyannis, next to Hyannis West. But there was a serious look at Marston's Mills Elementary School to see if it could be brought up back to line to be used for that. And at the time, it was looking somewhere between $4 and $5 million to invest into the building just to get it back to the bare minimum to make it work. Again, dealing with a building built in 1957, so you're really dealing with having to work with the walls that you have and the systems that are in place. Various other ideas that are listed here. Bridgewater State College was looking for a satellite location. We entertained them for a little while. Cape Cod Collaborative, which is operating in Osterville right now in one of the closed schools under lease to the school committee. They were looking to expand their operations, and they serve some of the most challenged students that we have here on Cape, not just in Barnstable, but on Cape. So those services for those very challenged students can be handed to them somewhere close to their neighborhood instead of having to spend 2 hours each way and moving out to Worcester or Lowell, where the services generally can be. We also looked at a potential expansion of some technical school programs. The school department was thinking about actually getting back into it. and some Head Start programming as well. Over the course of that time, there were 3 actual RFPs written and issued. The first RFP was in 2009 on behalf of the schools. The schools still retained it. The only response that we got was from a group of parents of children who had autism who wanted to have a sensory location where the children could have enhanced play and structure and instruction in order to help them adapt and work with the limitations that they might have had. Unfortunately, the proposal that came in expected the town and the school to fix up the school in order for that to be there, and this was a rather tough decision to make. The superintendent Grenier actually was a special education teacher, and she gave me a lot of background on that RFP, so we were able to put that out, but it just wasn't able to work. The second RFP in 2011, we actually never received any responses. Important to note that both of those were going to be long-term leases. There was not a sale opportunity at that point in time considered. The school department actually couldn't sell the property because they have the care, custody, and control. They would have to declare it surplus, and then it would have to come back to the town, and ultimately it's the town council that would decide and approve of a transfer of property. RFP number 3 was for the Cotuit Center for the Arts. And this was a lot of work. We were right at the edge of actually making this work. They were thinking that they were going to take this over and make this their education center so that it could take some of the pressure off the performance aspects that were just down the road. And they were able to maybe make that work. Now, since then, they've been able to acquire land next to their performance center and do their own thing. Biggest drawback here was going to be concern about shared public space, because we were adamant about trying to balance the use of that property and not just give it all away. It's a big parcel, and at the time when we were writing that RFP, the thought was that there could potentially be an enhanced ball field there or a playground. The old playground by that time had been pulled down because of concern and liability issues. But the Cotuit Center for the Arts didn't know how it was going to be able to balance that, and I think that they were moving in a different direction at that point. So this, unfortunately, didn't work. So 2014, the decision was made by the town at that point to mothball or winterize permanently. So the boilers were shut off, the water was turned off, the heating plant was decommissioned, windows and doors were secured, and the thought turned to, okay, what happens more with the land and less about what was going to happen with the building? So that started the conversation about demolition of the 3 portable classrooms that were existing there. Initially, there was talk to have that demolished by town personnel. So we started to work on that, and there was a hazardous materials assessment on the portables, and it was found some of the glues deep inside the walls and some of the mastics there were now considered hazardous materials, and we had to come back to the town council and then get a supplemental appropriation to have those 3 buildings taken down. So we cleared that part of it. In 2020, the Asset Management Advisory Committee, which was made up of town councilors who were helping to advise the town on how to manage town property, to take a look at opportunities. It was a chance to vet ideas, had shifted gears from the idea of disposal of tax possession properties. We had a successful sale in 2018. We started to take a look at properties differently. We started to take a look at town assets and see if they could be repurposed, because that whole committee was kind of set up. If we collectively as a town didn't have a purpose for a piece of property, then we needed to look at opportunities and examine what could and should be done with that property. This was one of the headlining opportunities, as was the Cotuit School. By then, Austinville Bay had come down. Design and bids were completed for demolition of the building, because that was one of the recommendations from that Asset Management Advisory Committee. This was about the time that we were working through the details of the transfer, the approval not required division of the Cotuit parcel, and the transfer of 8.5 acres and the building in Cotuit to the Cotuit Fire District. This building was going to be, we decided, or I say, again, we say we, there were a lot of people who were involved in this decision, town administration, asset management, to unencumber the property with the building. Maybe if there was no building there, that $1 million liability to make it go away, would make it more attractive. We did the designs, we did the bids, hazardous materials were abated, the underground oil tanks were removed successfully. There was a spill of maybe a gallon that needed to be remediated, but that was a very small amount, but everything came out clean, which is very important to state publicly because the project was well done that way. And the school was demoed in the summer of 2023. That brings us essentially to a situation now. I'm going to hand this back off to Jim. This is all intended to try to let people know or aren't familiar with the process how much time and effort it takes when we have a piece of property like this. We took it very seriously that this was a key asset that the town owned. The fact that this is 14 acres in the center of a village was never lost on any of the staff who were involved. The proximity to the library, the proximity to development, the shopping center that was down, we always kept that in mind. And the thought was always that when the CWMP came through, was there an opportunity to find a spot for a pump station here? How could this be used? This was always considered in a lot of the plans moving forward. I will stay and answer any questions as they come up, but I will pass this off to Jim at this point, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, David. So that was the history up to today, and we wanted to highlight a few examples nearby of similar processes. We're not unique in this process. As David mentioned, this building that was recently demolished was put up in the late 50s. All across the Commonwealth in the 50s, 60s, 70s, public buildings were going up, public schools were going up, and now each and every year there's another town with a problem building that they're looking to either reutilize or reutilize that property. These are just two prime examples of our neighbors nearby. Yarmouth just began their process. They just put out a request for proposals for a consultant to help them begin their master planning process. The Wing School is much farther along than we are today. Similarly, it was an aging building with enrollment going down, closed in 2015. They began their master planning process, had public forums. They had many different ideas of what could go there. Ultimately, the select board, similar to the town council, narrowed these concepts and then ultimately decided that the site should be reutilized for senior affordable housing with some mix of recreation. Sound similar. It was sold, but it also does have a number of different subsidies alongside that, and that is just a success of that one property, and hopefully they will continue along through to development. Our process began approximately a year ago. Stepping back actually 2 years ago, plus or minus, we got the green light from town council to start looking at this site in earnest. We knew that the building was coming down because it was agreed upon that the building would be demolished. So this aerial is a little bit old, that building's still there, but in fact, it was demolished, and the council at the time said, let's start the master planning process. Before we began going out to the public, we also, similar to what Yarmouth is doing right now, put out a request for proposals to engage a consultant to assist us with that process, to assist us with the public engagement, to assist us with those concept designs that you have in front of you this evening, and continue to assist us as we continue through this process. So that request for proposals went out, we procured the consultant, and they've been side by side with us all along, sitting through all these public meetings and hearing firsthand from our community. Secondarily, we began to examine our existing conditions. So as David Anthony mentioned, we have approximately a 15-acre overall site with a dominating central parcel of about 14.2 acres. The smaller property on that private road of Hilltop that is adjoining, and then that small, or the triangle parcel to the bottom, the southeast of the site there. So we began examining this site, the topography. We had our team at DPW assisted us in surveying the site so we could understand the topography. Yes, there is a very steep slope to the bottom left of this page there. It's naturally wooded at the time, currently, and luckily that steep slope is, it seems to be a perfect site for the pump station as our CWMP is progressing. CWMP. Secondarily, once we examined the existing conditions of the site, we examined what we have done to date in terms of our planning for this site and the village. So we looked back at the old local comprehensive plan from 2010, talking about Marston's Mills School at the time. This was obviously in 2010, so it predates any demolition of the building. And looking at what could be utilized for this site, potentially it states social and recreational programs. It also talks about a portion of this site should be utilized for affordable housing. We look over to our open space and rec plan. Our plan says explore potential for increasing and upgrading our playground spaces. It identifies locations for potential to provide opportunities for passive recreation. So maybe not necessarily structures and athletic fields, but maybe just a gazebo or a space to congregate. I heard things like farmers markets and the like, passive opportunities, walking trails. More recently, we looked to the current strategic plan for town council. And this states exploring possibilities of using town assets to create affordable private housing opportunities. And as you all are very familiar with the most recent town council philosophies, the town will be proactive in developing town-owned properties and acquiring blighted and abandoned properties for redevelopment for small-scale affordable housing projects, open space, and our passive recreational needs. So we began with our planning, our looking back at all the work we've done to date, all the history of the site, and we began to develop out what that process would look like. We started looking at, based on all the plans and talking internally with our departments, what those concepts we should be starting to outline as we engage with our public. So this is the brief list of single-family housing, small multifamily housing, municipal recreation, passive recreation, open space, enhancement of our ecological values, improved circulation, and retail. And I'm gonna stop at retail real quick because it was mentioned we haven't got rid of any real options. Technically, you could throw it back in the mix, but we haven't really engaged in this retail option moving forward. We didn't see it in our planning initiatives. We didn't hear it from our community. So we really haven't furthered that one. But all the other ones we certainly have continued to explore. So now that we've started to understand our community, started to understand the site, the traffic patterns, talking with our departments about needs, talking with our stakeholders, our village association, we began to start the community engagement efforts. We kicked it off with an open house workshop on the 30th of April, and we began to gather input from our community as to all those different kind of options. We had our boards out, we had our presentation on existing conditions, and we really wanted to engage the public and hear from everyone there. And it was a great turnout, a lot of good comments, and I will note that all of these comments were captured, also submitted both online and others, and provided to you all as the council. As we're working through this process, hopefully the thought was us doing the work of trying to gather a lot of good public comment can help in your decision making as we move forward. So we kicked off with the open house. We followed that up with a virtual workshop on May 2nd for anyone that couldn't make that meeting, preferred virtual, what have you. So we did that. We then followed up with a public site walk. And this was very valuable, in my opinion. Was well attended again. We walked essentially the perimeter of the site, and you begin to learn truly the nuances of how that site is being used today. Obviously much different than when a school was there, obviously much different than before that. And just understanding, the depth of what that buffer looks like, how close maybe some of the residents are, how noisy maybe Route 28 can be, those types of things. I think it was extremely beneficial to conduct that sidewalk, but also to hear and have the folks in the village that use this site really most every day, likely, pointing out a few things here and there that we wouldn't pick up from just plans or driving by the site or just standing out in the middle of the site and looking around. So after that, we began to think about what comments we have heard to date and some of the questions that we heard to date. So we followed this up with a public workshop on May 29th. This is just one of the yard signs that we're out and about. And we followed the May 29th meeting with a tabletop exercise that began to look at scale. Because the first meeting, we had a lot of great conversations about, how big is this site, and what uses could go there. But then it started to devolve into, okay, so yeah, it's 14 acres of usable land perhaps. And yeah, maybe I want a ball field there, but what does that look like? How much space does that actually take up? So before this meeting, we worked with our consulting team to draft out scaled maps and scaled model pieces that showed, what is a traditional soccer field? What's a traditional baseball field? What does a quarter-acre lot look like? What does a 20-space parking area look like? And we had all these puzzle pieces out on the tables, and we asked our community members to lay it out and see how it all worked on a 14-acre site. And I think that really was very productive in moving this conversation forward because, originally you could see individuals that maybe wanted, say, housing. And then they realized, wow, okay, 14 acres, that's a pretty big site. Maybe it doesn't need to all be housing. And so they started to move a couple other pieces on the board and move it around and have those discussions. So these are just two of the tabletop exercises. There were two that were all recreation, and there were a few others that were very similar to this here. So the other aspect, as we were doing these workshops and through the summer, we had this crowdsourcing tool that was online. We said, again, welcome to stop by our office, give us a call, shoot us an email. But we also had this great tool that our consulting team helped us get online that allowed you to just drop a dot on the map and say, what is a use that you would like to see there? So it was, again, another way to get some really quality feedback. Obviously, as you see, there are many different options, active recreation, housing, passive recreation, et cetera, all were kind of towards the top. Public comment boiled down. In general, in terms of all the comments received, we had four really overarching points that we as staff and working with our consultant who was with us along the way listening, kind of tried to boil it down into these points based on the public feedback that you all have. One, outdoor recreation and village meeting space should be present. Additional parking for the village needs to be added. So that was something that, I knew there was a need for parking, but I didn't really know the true necessity until I sat down and really started talking to some of the folks in the area. And it's true, additional parking certainly is needed in that area. Housing was expressed, but there was some specifics to it based on the comments received. Starter homes, ownership, and blending in with the village. So, we didn't hear big big, large apartment building. We didn't hear, 300 units. We heard, okay, if there's going to be housing, starter homes, blending in with the village. We also heard preservation of tree canopy. If you recall from the existing conditions, there's a lot of mature buffer, a lot of mature trees there. And so when we get into the concepts, you'll see that we try to be mindful of that tree canopy. So the proposed concepts that you have before you, we have three proposed concepts. These are the three that have been out there for about 3 months now. One is a recreation option only. One is a recreation option with single-family housing, and one is a recreation option with townhouse and single-family option. I was asked why there isn't a housing only, and again, that's not what we heard over the past year of talking with our community. That doesn't mean that option isn't still on the table if you so chose. These three options are based on the public sentiment that we have heard over the past year. Now, before we get into the concepts themselves, I just want to, you guys are all probably pretty familiar with the process, but I want to make sure we're all on kind of level playing field as to what this process looks like. So if the first option was the preferred option of our town, that means the town really retains the site. So meaning recreation only, town recreation only. That means the town retains the site. That means the authorization to dispose of the land is not granted. The town is retaining the property, and we're really going to get into the nuances now of what recreation should go on there. So that the planning process would kind of start over in terms of, okay, we have 14 acres, we're only doing recreation now, what does that look like? And we would need to start digging into further as to what truly we would like to see there, and we would also obviously need to seek funding for that. You'll see in the recreation options, whether it's recreation only or others, there are ball fields there, there are other items there. Really, those are to show you what scale can fit on the site, but it will ultimately be a further planning process to develop out what that recreational scheme would look like, and we'd certainly be hand in hand with our rec department as we do that. The other two options, recreation and housing option. Now, this is a little more of a process. The town would then need to subdivide this property. So again, if we're retaining any of this for town recreation, we're carving off that part of the property. We're carving off part of the land, and we'll retain that for town use in the future, whether that's recreation. And then we'll begin the planning process and develop out an RFP for the balance. So RFP, a request for proposals, and that request for proposals, much like we did in the past, would outline what the town is looking for, what is our master plan for this site. And the expectation would be that if the town determined, the town, meaning the town council determined, that we are disposing of the land that is housing, that is proposed for housing, we would put out an RFP, and a private entity would bid on it perhaps, and they would need to develop that out substantially in conformance with the plan that ultimately is decided upon. And so, meaning these concepts before you today are certainly not the final concepts. They're the starting point. And you as a council would refine those plans and ultimately maybe even list some conditions that would go on them, maybe the affordability or aesthetics or landscape or whatever it might be. And we would work together to develop out what a request for proposals would look like, and ultimately move forward with likely rezoning of the property. So that would be another option for the town council to look at that portion of the site and determine what are the strict standards in which development would take place at that location. So with that, we have three proposals before you this evening for discussion. These are those that were proposed or presented in October at the Marston's Mills Liberty Hall and in November here at Town Hall to our public. And I'm excited to be able to have the conversation now with our town council on these three concepts. I'm sure you guys have all had an opportunity to kind of take a look at these, so I'll go generally over these and then hopefully open up to some good discussion. The first concept, as I mentioned, is recreation only. What we have here is Main Street to the north of the site, 28 to the south of the site, and it's predominantly two large active fields. You should note that to the top right, you'll see the purple area. As noted, the playground has always been something that has been a discussion that is in every single concept that you'll see here. So this here is the playground that we established at this location. The blue is the basketball court, again, showing size and scale to show you that you could have two very large fields. You could have a basketball, pickleball, whatever that might, tennis court, what have you. It does have the parking that was discussed, a whole host of parking to the north, a smaller site or a smaller parking area to the south. And then you'll notice the dashed lines that kind of run to the edges. And those are the walking trails that we heard from each one of our workshops, really, and riddled through our public comment is what a great opportunity, even for just the existing mature vegetation that's there today, to have a nice walking trail that might be able to go through there. So that's what the dashed lines were. The orange circles were play structures or could even be exercise structures that you see on walking trails at times. And so that was the recreation option there. Should note that each one of these concepts on the bottom left of this page, where there's a triangle, you might be able to read that. That's where the proposed pump station is. So we've preserved that in every concept. We're not touching it from a master planning perspective, with the knowledge that this has been identified as the location for the pump station. It is also a very challenging, you'll see the white dash, the white dashes are the topography. So as those white dashes get closer together, that means it's getting steeper and steeper and steeper. So you'll see on those edges, it gets a little challenging there. But by and large, this concept retains much of the mature vegetation on a large open level field. Second option begins to share this space. This space includes, again, recreation to the north of the site, showing, again, what looks like a smaller soccer field, so a smaller athletic field, a playground structure, again, settled in the purple area, walking trails going around the edges, a lot of parking to the north, for both the village center and potentially the recreation. And then ultimately, these brown boxes are meant to show scale of potential single-family homes. So we label them as cottages, we label them as single-family homes, we label them as ADUs. But really, what we're talking about here is you got plus or minus 20 structures that are dwelling units for the future of this area. So we're talking about 20 really starter homes, again, based on the language that we heard from our community, 20 starter homes towards the south, including one, I believe, right there on Hilltop. You'll see just south of that Hilltop building, there is those dashed lines. So again, outlining where maybe there's a potential to make that connection, that walking trail connection, that would get you to the downtown area where the shops are a little bit easier. So this ultimately shows you the single-family options, laying out how it could be done for sale, parcel by parcel, and that's option 2. Option 3 similar in nature. Recreation to the north, housing to the south. I should note for both of these, it's probably kind of hard to make out on the big screen there, but to the very south where 28 is, and you'll see the houses that are coming closer to 28. We added vegetation, we added berms in that area to signify the need for that buffer because we recognize, noise and traffic in that area. I should also note that as it's laid out today, we identified a real challenge about taking a left out of this site on the 28. If anybody's tried it, 28 is always busy, and so this is laid out as more of a right in, right out. The desire for the right in, right out is there are good options for groceries and other goods, to that side. So completely blocking it off and sending everybody to Main Street didn't seem ideal. So that's why we left a right in, right out option down to the bottom there. Similar to this option here, right in, right out, berms and buffers, walking trails, recreation to the north of the residential. Again, kind of laying it out a little bit different, making sure that there's some adequate parking, try to retain as much buffer as possible and mature trees. We even retain, for both of these, we even are able to, and you could probably do it as well for this one, maintain the mature trees that were laid out right around the foundation of the old school. They're surviving and seem to be doing well. So we try to make sure that we, again, try to save as many mature trees as possible as we're laying this out. This option is a little bit different than obviously the single family. This is looking more of the townhouse style. Again, the bottom line is we're looking at approximately 20 dwelling units at this location. This could be structured in a different manner depending on how the town council wishes to proceed. It could be for sale. This could also be structured in more of a rental option. And it also could be done in more of an HOA style, homeowner association style, where there's, common green space here that could be, allocated through an HOA process. Both of these, as I mentioned earlier in terms of process, if we were to proceed with one of these options, again, there would be a surveyed line between the recreation and the residential. That recreation would be retained, or the space where the recreation would be retained. The area in which the housing structures could be, would be subdivided off. And a request for proposals developing out specific standards in which we would like to see accomplished if we were to sell the land and request development of these style housing units at that location. So that's the process, that's where we've been, that's where we have been recently, and now where we're headed. So we have three concepts that are our starting point for our conversation. Tonight, I'm hoping to have a positive discussion as to the direction in which we would like to proceed, and that direction referring to both concepts and process. I'm happy to take any comments and work towards a preferred concept. We can also expand our process in any which way we so choose in order to, put this important property in the right direction so that we land ultimately on a preferred use for this site. After our conversation this evening, I'm certainly happy to return to discuss further. And at a later date, if we begin to refine concepts, we can work with our consulting team to bring back a more refined concept or concepts for your consideration. And then ultimately, it's to determine whether or not, so the ultimate decision here for the council, not this evening, but in the future, is whether or not we are to dispose of a portion or the entirety of the site, and for what. So with that, I thank you, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. I would like to open it up to councilors and Councilor Mendez.
Thank you, Jim. Great presentation. Just a quick question for you. On the third proposal, the mixed site use with the townhouses, is there any way we can redesign the townhouses to be smaller single-family houses and keep that same footprint?
Smaller, single-family house?
Instead of
Yes,
townhouses?
absolutely. Yes, we could absolutely do that.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, any further discussion on my left? No? On my right? Counselor Schnapp?
Thank you, President Tomash, and thank you both, David and Jim, for your presentation this evening. Could you give us, I think what I'm feeling is that we may need some additional information. I think these concepts give us sort of some ideas of how we might want to move forward, but I think there's some other information that might help us better understand what the best use of this parcel would be. Has the Recreation Department weighed in at all in terms of our need for specific recreation facilities?
Yes, yes. So the Recreation Department, in the beginning of the process, and then once we heard a lot of the public feedback, we re-engaged with the Rec Department as to, what the true needs are. To date, Director Ganella had stated to me that, if we are to look at recreational spaces, the preferred option would be more of a passive recreation, maybe not additional active ball fields. They've determined that they don't believe that additional active ball fields are necessary at this time. But I talked to him actually just today again, and we could certainly have that full conversation at a later date if that was something of interest to the council, to really understand the, kind of go a similar presentation as to the true needs in the recreational fields.
Mm-hmm. And the playground, which, as Councilor Levesque has said, has always been something that we've been interested in pursuing. I imagine that can go in a number of different directions too, in terms of the age range, that it, if it's multiple ages, and then if there's complementary recreational assets that would go with that. But it also raises the question on the recreational uses, what determines the volume of parking that we need there? I'm looking at these concept plans, and it's like, that's a lot of asphalt, that's a lot of parking. A lot of the need in the village is very occasional. If you're not using the parking for use at the site, I'm not saying that there isn't times that you need parking and we should provide for it, but has there been any studies in terms of what optimum number of off-site parking we need?
Yeah,
and where it's better located so that there's access to it? Because it seems like the spaces closer to Main Street would make more sense than the ones tucked into the parcel.
Yep, so ultimately it's going to be determined by the preferred concepts that we so choose and how much recreation, because the recreational part is driving a little bit of the parking needs there. I will agree, though, that we did add maybe a little bit extra parking to that location because of the dual needs there. There is the church nearby, there is the library nearby, as well as really is the downtown Village Center area. And so, yes, it could be more event-based, and we could certainly scale back some of that parking. But again, I would be hesitant to do so until we had a real determination as to whether or not we want to scale back the recreation some, or if we're going to expand it more. Then we can nail down even more finer grain as to specific parking numbers that would be necessary there.
It's kind of hard to know cart leading horse, because if for those of us who are interested in a balance between some recreation, which might be more passive with a playground, and housing, and how those two interact with one another, and how much housing and where. And I think there's a lot of financial considerations, both in terms of, how much the town wants to take on as, another asset that it has to take care of, versus the other piece of it is what's the financial feasibility of the various housing options that we're looking at and the range of incomes that we would like to serve and how that's going to determine, its feasibility and sometimes, what size. So a lot of this is kind of coming at it, if you make a decision over here, it'll influence this over here. And I think tonight is really an opportunity for all of us to give our preliminary sort of opinions on what direction we'd like the staff to go in looking at this. So I hope everyone has an opportunity to chime in a little bit, even if you're feeling a little bit not sure you have everything you need to make an opinion. And maybe if that's the case, we need more information.
Thank you. Any further comment on my right? Councilor Turkles?
Thank you, President Tamish. I'm just curious if you could explain for us in the audience so that people are clear. We could, in theory, as a council, not tonight I'm saying, but choose number 3. And we have all of these specificities that we want for number 3. What is the likelihood in the RFP process of the level of detail that you think that we would be able to actually guarantee that number 3 will be built as we envision it, as the town councilors have spent time on that, but also the Marston's Mills people and all of their efforts that have gone into this? How likely are we that we're going to hand over this piece of property and then it actually comes out looking like something that we say, this is what we want, and we may not end up with that, or will we? Like, I'm just, because this is different, it's a town-owned piece of property, but once we sell it, we lose that level of control. So I'd like some explanation on how that works.
No, you actually hit the nail on the head there. It is a town-owned piece of property. That's what makes it so much different than every permitted development you've seen recently. We have our standards in place through zoning for a private entity to come in, and those are the general parameters. Here, we get to ratchet that up, tenfold if we so chose, and we spell that out in the request for proposals. Now, the finer point is that, to Paula's point again, or excuse me, Councilor Schnapp's point, that it needs to be financially feasible. So if you're adding conditions on there, you got to make sure that it is realistic in terms of the market. But the conditions that you put out and the plan that you put out can be, as long as we work well with asset management and draft a really strong request for proposals that spells out from A to Z what the expectations are here. That's what goes along with the sale of land, and that's the approval. So that is what you would see. Now, if it's very important for us to write those requests for proposals and those conditions and those standards. So that's why I said tonight this is the starting point, because we have just a concept plan. If we put that out there, I think we would all have a differing opinion of what that end result would be, any one of these options. So as we refine the plan, we'll want to put in things like maybe even elevations we'll need to work out, maybe even aesthetics on those elevations that we want to see there. Maybe it's affordable requirements that we want to see there. So I think because this is a unique opportunity for the town, that it is a town-owned piece of land, we do control a little bit more of the destiny for this site.
And do we end up getting to a place where we're so prescriptive that we somehow make this project so expensive that it languishes in the day and it never gets built, so that we're getting to a level of detail and promise that actually isn't buildable? In that it increases the cost, or maybe makes this project more like we need to be sending the bid out to be using union labor and those kinds of things? Or is it because we're selling the ownership, we don't have to worry about that caveat, as opposed to if we retain ownership and we put this out to bid, that would be a different fee schedule than if we're selling the piece of property?
No, we absolutely have to be cognizant of the conditions you put in place and making it not feasible. I think you would learn that quickly through that request for proposals, though. Someone's not going to very likely bid on it if they don't find it a feasible development to build. I actually have experience with this. In the past, there was a school that was torn down, and we put out a request for proposals, and we had it at a very high percentage of affordability. And it turned out that no one was interested in building it with that rate of affordability. So when we put out that request for proposals, no one bid on it. And then we reached out to those who asked for the request for proposals, at least, that said, give me a copy, I think I want to bid on it. And we said, well, why didn't you bid on it? And they said, I can't do it. It won't work. With that affordability rate, it's just not going to work. So we went back to the drawing board. We adjusted. We talked to the select board of that community and said, okay, what's your priorities? What are our next steps here? And they adjusted that affordability, and we got 3 proposals. The priority of the select board at that time was to recoup the cost of the demolition of the building, and that is what exactly happened. And then there were that the development was constructed per the plan.
Good.
And as far as affordability, how much control do we actually have as a town council to have, again, that request for affordability? I mean, I think what I hear you saying is partly is it a project that's buildable? That would somewhat determine it. But, we heard from Mr. Brennan about the project, and he said, it's 10%. So even within that program, let's just say that's something we entertained, does it only limit us to 10%? So I guess I'm wondering, again, it's that sense like we think we have some control up here. The question is really how much control do we have? Because I'd like to know, where we stand with that.
Right now, you have all the control. So that one is, that specific program is exactly that. It's a state program, and they specify that percent. You could opt to go through that state program. You could also opt to, stick with our current inclusionary housing ordinance that says 10%. But ultimately, if either of these options, meaning the housing options, were to move forward, there would need to be a rezoning of the land. And at that time, you could either put it in the zoning, or you could put it, much like, for instance, when the mall came to the council and they wanted to adjust their zoning, the council requested that they up it to 13% affordability. And so that was approved with that. This could be something similar. You could look at it from many different ways, depending on what the priority is. And so you could either do it zoning, or you could do it through conditions of the plan as well.
One last question about the process leading us to hiring the consultant. I'm just wondering how much conversation was there had here on the dais as far as between counselors? I feel like some of this conversation maybe should have happened before we even got to this point. I kind of feel like it is a little bit of the cart before the horse. And obviously, Marston's Mills has had a lot of input, and there wasn't a lot of opportunity outside of Marston's Mills to have input, and it is a town-owned piece of property. So I'm just wondering kind of how we got here, or maybe I missed something, so.
No, I believe it might have been before you were on the council as well. The council certainly did talk about this as a town asset that needs to be looked at. As Mr. Anthony mentioned, this has been an ongoing conversation for 20 years or so as to the desire. As I mentioned early in the presentation, we have numerous planning efforts that identify this as both an opportunity for the community, and what that opportunity looks like, depending on the plan you read, recreation, housing, et cetera. So those are all the ways in which we said, okay, there's a whole host of options that could go on here. The council said, well, we need to study it. And with that study, we want you to talk to our community. So we need a robust community engagement. That's exactly what we did. We went out, we said, just like Yarmouth is doing, we said, we should get our consultant on board now so they can sit next to us and hear from our community members' mouths exactly what their desires are, and be able to listen to our town council to determine what their desires are. So not only that, but I also would say that it wasn't just Marston's Mills that had an opportunity to speak, not by any means. We had a lot of great feedback, both virtually here at Town Hall, in our crowdsource tool. And I would say many of the folks at Liberty Hall, while many of them were from the village, certainly, there were a number of folks from outside the village. And, you know, our communications don't stop at Liberty Hall at our workshop. I mean, I engage with the public. I know all of you engage with your public, you know, every day, and we get emails and calls, and all of that public feedback is provided to you in your package. So, you know, yes, this is your first conversation formally here at the dais, but I think it's been a long time coming, and hopefully we can continue it.
Thank you. Anything else? Councilor Vice President Clark.
Thank you very much, President Tamish, and thank you very much, Director Kupfer, for all this work on this concept and for your public outreach. It was interesting for me to hear that when you brought this to the attention of the rec department, that the director said we pretty much have enough ball fields, and I can understand it comes with the obligation of maintaining those fields. But I was also, it piqued my interest to hear from Attorney Brennan and his concept for these cottage-style homes or this starter homes, senior homes. And I was wondering if that could be considered for some of these novel options, especially when he mentioned that the town can get paid for some of this work. And that makes a financial angle on this that's attractive to me. So I do support housing on this property, and up to about half of the property I think should be considered for housing, in my opinion. And I do understand the benefits of providing more parking for the Marston's Mills community. Having been involved years ago at River Day, I know how snug it is over there for putting cars or for having any activities. So, but it is a narrow entrance to get to the school from the, is that Main Street angle. So I can understand that that might need to be addressed somehow. But that's my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you. Any of the councilors on Zoom? Lynn, have you? Council Starr? Council Starr?
Yes, thank you, President Tamish. First of all, I'd like to say that I agree with Councilor Turkelson that we need to make sure that what we're proposing is going to work with the developers before we get too far into a SRF. I don't know how do we go. We sort of do that at the same time. You know, whether we can, you know, like ask, how do we gauge those people who might bid on something like this and approach them and say, you know, where are your red lines? I don't know. That's just one thought. I'd like to thank everyone for their opinions tonight and their ideas. We're going to need lots of those ideas as we move forward. This is a unique property. I think people keep talking about there are other places in town that this could be done for housing, but I don't think they really exist. I think we've gotten rid of most of the properties that could possibly do that in terms of what the town owns. Maybe David Anthony could tell us more about that. So I think we have a number of policy decisions we have to make, you know, which we've talked about, whether there should be ownership or rentals, senior housing, what's the percentage of affordability we can ask for. But I think the one thing I would say is that we can make this decision tonight is to remove the recreation only option. That would be my recommendation. I think it's a decision that would sort of clarify where we need to go. We've been talking about housing on this property for over 10 years. The housing need is there. So I would ask the chair if we couldn't have a discussion now about what, either with a straw vote or just everybody, what I know I just heard Councilor Clark say that housing should be part of this process. And I think it might be one of the first steps we could take to sort of narrow down what we need to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Penn?
Yes, thank you. It occurred to me, had we formulated the ad hoc committee, not that we need more committees, but to recommend policy with respect to the disposition of property and development of town-owned property, we could be listening to their recommendations right now. But that's an opportunity that didn't happen. So here we be. My specific comments. Please no retail. I heard Mr. Kupfer say, yeah, that's been kind of eliminated. Nobody's pushed for that. But yeah, get that off that list, please. Thank you. And this is somebody from a retail family, as you all know. I also suggest that you move housing away from Route 28 due to the noise factor. Maybe do some swaps between whatever recreation survives and the housing closer to the village and away from 28. I'd like to see, particularly because this is town-owned property, 100% income sustainable housing. I used to call it paycheck sustainable housing, but not everybody's working who might be in this housing, but they still have income. So I've changed my label to income sustainable housing. And I think it'd be great if it was 100% on town-owned property, built to scale and designed to look like it's been there forever. I'd like to hear from speaking of ad hoc committees, our ad hoc housing committee regarding creative subsidies and programs that they're considering and discussing. I'd like to hear from them, who shall the town benefit from partnering with? Is it HAC? Is it POA? Is it all of the above? Is it somebody new? Shall the town put out an RFI instead of an RFP? I think there are advantages to both there. I think that they have discussed and or are aware of programs that other communities have done elsewhere, very similar to what Mr. Brennan brought forward. The state didn't make that up all by themselves. Where money, I know that there was a county somewhere where this county had, I don't remember the millions of dollars that they ended up with, that they paid the town every year for the cost of doing developments like this. And it was very lucrative for the town. I don't know, I'm screwing it up. It's better if the committee says it on their own. So anyway, that's my 2 cents for the night, and thank you very much for doing this. And it was a great presentation by Mr. Anthony and Mr. Kupfer, and thank you to everybody who's involved.
Thank you. I would like to put my 2 cents worth in. I see this as a compromise parcel. If you took even 12 acres and you said 6 were for passive recreation, and perhaps the north side of it was, the gazebos and the walking paths and whatever, and the south side, I disagree with Councilor Penn. I would put the housing on the south side. Jim, do you happen to know Stagecoach Village, for example? I drove up there. Take a look at that. Mm-hmm. That's 12 units. What size parcel that is on?
Oh, I don't know off the top of my head.
And in Kimber Woods,
Yeah, so that's the shared parcels there. But so what we're talking about, or what we're shown on the, like for instance, concept 2, where the smaller lots of single-family homes, that actually is somewhat close to what that 40Y option. So it's essentially a 1/4 acre lots is what we're talking about there. So that would be, similar to actually our historic pattern of development. So if you go through many of our single-family residential, you'll see approximately a 1/4 acre lots. So that's what we're trying to mimic. And you actually see around the village center, it's very similar. Village center of Marston's Mills, very similar. There's actually on Hilltop, I believe, they're all maybe slightly more than a quarter acre, maybe a third of an acre lots there. So it's trying to blend in. So that's what that concept 2 looks like.
Yeah. I live in an older neighborhood, and mine's about a third of an acre, and, I don't see that as an issue, but, I see the shared concept. Perhaps, as I say, recreation in the north, housing to the south. I see Mr. Presby's here. I would like to charge his committee with commenting on this, if they would. I think he's seen the presentations for the rest of his committee. Perhaps you could talk to them or refer them to the presentations that have been given. And I'd like them to weigh in on the thing. The 40Y proposal does intrigue me. I'd like to hear more about that at some point. And, obviously we're not going to have a vote or anything else on this tonight. There's a lot more information that we need. But, Councilor Vivek, could you?
Thank you, President Tamish. Just a few questions. I know that we kind of bounced around and again, a little bit of input. As far as the buffer zone areas, can there be CR restrictions on those buffer zone areas?
Yeah, great question. And I know I heard that earlier, and I meant to bring that up, so thank you. So absolutely, we could do that for the entirety of the perimeter and maybe even enhance the buffers some and add that in. That's actually what we traditionally do from the private market when we do an open space recreation subdivision. So very similar, where they cluster the houses, they make the lots a little bit smaller, and in turn you get a little bit more density there, but you get a lot more open space around the perimeter, and that is deed restricted. So we certainly could entertain that. That could be one of the stipulations that we pursue.
Great. And then that's where maybe thank you. Maybe where the walking paths could be, or the exercise areas and things of that nature. Of course, if that was okay with the abutters, if that passive recreation took place there. I do, hear a lot about, it's ironic actually that the farming community of Marston's Mills doesn't have a farmer's market. And it's something that I've tried to talk to Janet Milkman about with Fuller Farm. It could be a possibility there, or, it would just be a great opportunity, especially for so many small home businesses, really, that take place in Marston's Mills, with that permitting that we've been, we've worked on, Councilor Schnepp sponsored. And so, that intrigues me. Could there possibly be that place for that? The gazebo, I hear people talk about that, and not even necessarily the gazebo, but the place where you can have a cookout, throw a Frisbee, that type of thing. Again, go back to first and foremost, and I liked how you kind of broke it up in that slide, that could we just move forward with that recreation piece to move that along? Because, again, that's something that's been talked about for some time, that parking that's much needed for any kind of activity that's needed. Moving forward with that possibly. And again, it's a council decision, I understand that. So, but would the council be agreeable to that? And then do that, to answer questions that are here in regards to 40Y. I was having a conversation with Secretary Augustus from the state in regards to this 40Y. And Councilor Penn is correct. This concept of 40Y, this affordable starter home idea, is not new. It was a kind of, it was 40R at one point, and it was connected to public transportation and BTA. Of course, that's in the news lately. And then in the town of Milton, but they found that it wasn't being used because of that. Because the highest and best use of property near an MBTA is commercial. So if they removed that requirement and created this 40Y, now it's 10% minimal. Could we propose a 20% affordability or higher? Again, I think maybe is it possible to do a feasibility study in regards to a housing concept type of thing? Again, nothing written in stone, but what is possible and study that out a little bit more in regards to what is even possible in regards to that. And again, take all those things in consideration. But I just really, obviously, this is my precinct. I just really appreciate all the counselors and their comments in regards to open-mindedness and really listening to that. And again, nothing's written in stone. This is a conversation, and I really appreciate, I think this is great. I know it started with a few meetings ago when we started talking about the TIFs and the tie agreements. We're really getting some really good discussions happening on this dais, and it's really encouraging, I think, to other counselors and the public, and I think this is a great discussion too, so I just want to say thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Lutzke?
Yes, thank you, President Tamish. I'm going to agree with Councilor Penn, and I mentioned this earlier at one of the meetings. I don't like the housing down by Route 28. I think it really puts those residents who live there at a disadvantage. And I also think it creates a natural segregation, that these new residents are segregated from the beginning. I think the housing ought to be tucked more in with the other housing, and I'd just like to see that explored. I'd ask for that, to have that explored, so that we don't build in a natural segregation. I'd also like to explore this in the context of the seasonal communities. And I say that because I hear a lot of folks are concerned about local option. And from my understanding, you can't put in local option and agree with the fair housing. I may be ignorant to know that, but I'd like to see that explored. You know, would the seasonal communities designation help us in this? Because it is, I understand, geared towards the firefighters, the teachers, that you can actually designate that. And that seems to be a desire I've heard. And I'd like to see other, creative options explored. We have, the mass housing program. We have some different things that you can do at the affordability levels that are a little bit higher, so you don't restrict people to such a degree. And I think we need to hear a little more information on these different programs to really target the housing that we need there and what's been expressed as a desire to be there. And I agree too. It sounds like we're getting support from the Recreation Department and the residents that it's more of a passive recreation there. And for the parking, it should be pervious material. Councilor Steppen mentioned that. If it is, more of an occasional driven parking, the idea of more asphalt, the maintenance associated with that, if that's being retained by the town, when you can do, beautiful things that are pervious, would be a better way to do that, and not dedicate what I think is the most beneficial part of that land, the most protected, the most where you might fold into a community, and you're devoting it to cars. We see too much. I mean, I can look right out here if I could see through the dark, and I'd see all the parking lots right down here, which I guess serves the people who are going on the boats, but then the cars are sitting there. I mean, they're getting the prime real estate, and I'd hate to see that here. I understand the need for parking, and people want to walk closely to their destinations, but let's really, think about that. So I'd like more information on the art of the possible in terms of how, precise we can be in saying what housing. So I do support housing here, and I support the passive recreation. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments from the councilors? Councilor Schnepp?
Thank you, President Tamish. I actually wanted to support your recommendation that the ad hoc committee take a look at some of the housing options, because I know we have some expertise on the committee that can, and good minds to help us understand what our housing needs are. I mean, this should be based on whether it's our housing production, but what does our community really need? Because as a town asset, this is what we really can direct it toward. And the other piece of that is, if we go for some balance that is a market rate and an affordable, there might be some expectation that, we're not giving this land away. This is not, because a lot of times public land is given away for either a 99-year lease for $1 or something. My sense is if we went in the direction of a 40Y or whatever, we're not controlling the market prices of those homes. And so we would want to make sure we're not just handing this valuable parcel away to a developer and not either recover our costs for the demolition of the school, which you mentioned. I mean, so I think that's why I think the financial feasibility is a really critical piece of, what we finally end up doing on that parcel. So I think the ad hoc committee can, add some recommendations back to staff or, or steps back to the council on what might be a good way forward, so.
Thank you. Any other comment? Seeing none. Thank you, Mr. Kupfer.
Thank you all. This was a great discussion, and we'll be back before you in the future with a lot of good suggestions for you guys. Thank you.
Absolutely, and I would certainly encourage any of the counselors, any of the public to contact you with any questions or further suggestions. Thank you. Okay. Yes. We're going to take about a 10-minute recess.
Question?
I'm sorry, Councilor Schmidt.
Since this is still communications, is it time for any announcements? Can we sneak those in before?
Can we take a break and you'll do that?
Well, it's actually part of our agenda right now. It's communications, so, but it's really quick.
Well, I think some people need a break.
Okay, all right.
Okay, so we're going to take 10 minutes. Counselor Penn, recognize you. You had an announcement?
Hi, yes. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Great. This is just, I take off on what was in the paper in the front page, today's paper, Massachusetts Maritime Academy. I just want to remind everybody, used to be in the building you're in from 1942 to 1949. So it is kind of relevant in a way. It was called at the time Massachusetts Nautical Training School. And they relocated to Buzzards Bay because the training ship at the time that they had, which I believe was under sail, had too big a draft and it couldn't fit into the harbor. So it was time to move. And they've been in Buzzards Bay, very happy there ever since. So today's paper, to get on with it, they had photos of a freshman standing watch on the bow for the new multi-purpose training ship, and it's being provisioned for sea term. I think many of you know that they go to sea, come back the end of February, do a bunch of stops, load, offload, learn all that good stuff. I had the privilege while I was on the board at MMA of traveling to DC with the other 5 U.S. maritime academies. I never knew there were a total of 6 actually in the country, but there are, including the Great Lakes, to start the lobbying and the funding for these new ships. Because up until this time, I think a lot of us have read about how steamship got an old ship and they cut it up and they made it smaller and they did this and they did that. And that's what they used to do to the training ships. But now they're all going to be designed the same. All the parts will be the same. All the replacement parts will be the same. It makes sense. And all the systems on it are brand new, up to date. So everything they're learning on, they're right on the money, which makes sense. So that was probably about 10 years ago that we started that, and the ship was delivered recently. And the education and experience the cadets receive during sea term is absolutely invaluable. And as we all know, those guys, every single one of them has a job at graduation if they want one. So anyway, that was my little follow-up on the front page article in the Cape Cod Times today. I'm done. Thank you.
Very good, thank you. Speaking of MMA, we just met an intern from their emergency management program who will be working with the town for the next several months, both in emergency management with the town and with the fire department. So we welcome him. Councilor Schnapp.
Thank you, President Tamish. Since we will not be meeting as a town council until January 30th, I wanted to announce that on Saturday, January 25th, Marston's Mills Village Association will be having their annual ham and bean supper. This is always something fun in the winter to attend. It will be from 4 to 6 o'clock at Liberty Hall on Main Street in Marston's Mills. Still $10 for a very hearty meal. And you can also get takeout if you'd like. And all the proceeds go to the MMVA Scholarship Fund. So it's a nice time. I know we'll be at the MMA conference for that weekend, but if you get home early or there's other folks out there, please think of attending. Thank you.
Very good, thank you. Any further comment? Okay. Move on to old business. Councilor Turkelson, could you introduce 2025-061?
Thank you, President Tamish. This is an item of old business that may be acted upon by a majority vote. It's item number 2025-061, appointments to a board committee commission for the Conservation Commission, the Disability Commission, the Historical Commission, and the Infrastructure and Energy Committee. Thank you.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Just a reminder, all votes are going to have to be roll call votes. So, Madam Clerk?
Counselors, Burdick,
Yes.
Clark,
Yes.
Crow,
Yes.
Levesque,
Yes.
Ludke,
Yes.
Neary,
Yes.
Penn,
Yes.
Schnepp,
Yes.
Tamish,
Yes.
Turkelson,
Yes.
Bloom.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, the motion passes. Thank you. Councilor Levesque, could you do 25063, please?
Thank you, President Tamish. This is new business, may be acted upon majority vote. This is item number 2025-063, authorization to contract for and expend a federal fiscal year 2024 Edward Byrne Memorial Justice Assistant Grant in the amount of $19,924 from the U.S. Department of Justice as written.
Second.
Thank you. I would like to recognize Chief Chalice.
Good evening, President Tamish and town council members. There it is.
There
Jean
you-
Chalice, Chief of Police. The department is requesting permission to expend the $19,924 that were awarded through the fiscal year 24 Edward Byrne Memorial Justice Assistance Grant. So we'll be spreading the funding across a number of projects, one of which is our Citizens Police Academy. We'll run one class, which is actually set to finish on January 22nd. And we run one Police Explorers program, which is geared towards high school students who are interested in pursuing or have an interest in law enforcement and want to learn more about the workings at the police department. And we would like to provide our co-response clinician with a ballistic vest because that clinician is right out in the fray with the officers when they're responding to high volatility calls such as mental health emergencies. And then we were planning on using a small portion of the money to purchase a smart board to benefit the joint program between the police department and People of Action that was going to be running at HYCC. But I believe the location is somewhat up in the air, so we're going to just reserve those funds, and then we'll do a grant amendment when we identify exactly what the need will be for whatever that location is when they decide on what it will be. So, but that's a great program intended to provide like local youth with an opportunity for some mentoring, programs on financial literacy, tutoring, and information on future educational opportunities. So we'll be working with Officer Morrison and People of Action to provide that type of structured program after school. And so these are all going to allow us to just further our community policing programs.
Very good, thank you. Any questions or comment on my right? Councilor Turkelson.
Thank you, President Tamish. I'm happy to hear about the bulletproof vest for the co-response clinician. That kind of seems like that should have already been in place, so that makes me think how dangerous that could be for that person, so I'm really happy to hear that.
They were wearing a vest. It was just not one that was tailored to them. So
Perfect.
Everybody turns their old vests in, and they were definitely wearing a vest.
Great, thanks.
Any questions or comments on my left? Seeing none, Madam Clerk?
Counselors, Clark,
Yes.
Crow,
Yes.
Levesque,
Yes.
Ludke,
Yes.
Neary,
Yes.
Penn,
Yes.
Schnepp,
Yes.
Tamish,
Yes.
Turkelson,
Yes.
Bloom,
Yes.
Burdick,
Yes.
11 yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Don't go too far. You have another one.
I don't.
Oh, I apologize, it's not you. My apologies, Chief. Councilor Ludke, if you would, please.
Thank you. This is new business. It may be acted upon by a majority vote. Item 2025-064, authorization to contract for and expend a grant in the amount of $5,460 from the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection for the purpose of enhancing the town's waste reduction programs.
Thank you. Second. Recognize Mr. Santos.
Good evening, Mr. President, Town Councilors. Dan Santos, Director of Public Works. This is an annual grant that I'm presenting that we've gotten for at least the last 12 years that I've been here, and I'm sure it was before that. But the town has been awarded this $5,460 grant from the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection under their Recycling Dividends Program. The grant award was made because of specific programs and policies the town has implemented to maximize reuse, recycling, and waste reduction. The acceptance of this grant will allow the Solid Waste Division in the town to enhance its waste reduction programs through a variety of means, including the acquisition of recycling containers, recycling carts, bins, waste reduction in our recycling outreach and educational materials, and other related expenses authorized in the Recycling Dividends Program. Yeah, and that's all I have. Thank you.
Very good. Any questions or comments on my right? Councilor Vice President Clark.
Thank you. Director Santos, just to let you know, I'm a big fan of those compost earth machines, and I think that they have become more popular with people doing home gardening. My 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you. Any comment or question, Councilor Lutzke?
Yeah, I'd add my 2 cents. You know, I compost at home, but with this weather, with everything frozen solid, it's been really nice to be able to take stuff out there and put it in those composting bins. And I've even surprised myself, because I don't go every day, at how quickly it adds up. And it kind of makes me understand, you know, the data you did provide, that about 25 to 30% of our waste could be composted. It's
Right.
incredible how much it adds up. Absolutely amazing. So it's a great program. Anything we can do to get more people putting their food waste in there
It's
would
been
be better.
popular. I think it's been successful. We're going to do some more outreach with it, some signage. Right now, we're collecting on average about 1,200 pounds a week. Now, we have to pay to get rid of that, unfortunately. But we're able to use this program for at least 5 years to pay that cost. So, but eventually, we have to pay for that unless we can find a vendor that's going to pay us for it.
Does that go out to Joint Base Cape Cod? Is that where it goes? The compost, the
No.
food waste?
No, there's I think it's a pig farmer, basically, that takes the waste, but we have to pay, and they utilize it.
So it's not actually composted, it's fed to pigs? I mean,
Right.
oh,
It's used.
okay.
I may have the name here. The Watts Family Farm.
Mr. Santos, any thought of getting a couple of pigs for the,
And add it to
the
the
transfer
goats,
station?
Goats and pigs, we'll have a regular menagerie.
Right. Any further questions?
Then you get to pay people to come.
Okay, seeing none, thank you. Madam Clerk?
Councilors: Crow,
Yes.
Levesque,
Yes.
Ludke,
Yes.
Neary,
Yes.
Penn,
Yes.
Schnapp,
Yes.
Tamish,
Yes.
Turkelson. Yes.
Bloom,
Yes.
Burdick,
Yes.
Clark.
Yes.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Councilor Clark, would you do 2025-065? It's a referral.
With pleasure. Thank you very much, President Tamish. This is new business to be referred to a public hearing on January 30th, 2025. Agenda item 2025-065, appropriation order in the amount of $164,000 in Community Preservation Act funds for the purpose of conservation, preservation, and restoration of gravestones in the Universalist Cemetery located at 320 Main Street, Hyannis, as shown on Assessor's Map 327, Parcel 074.
Thank you. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Madam Clerk?
Councilors: Levesque,
Yes.
Ludke,
Yes.
Neary,
Yes.
Penn,
Yes.
Schnapp,
Yes.
Starr. Oh, excuse me, Tamish,
Yes.
Turkelson.
Yes.
Bloom, Yes.
Burdick.
Yes.
Clark.
Yes.
Crow.
Yes.
11 yes.
Thank you. Counselor Crowe.
Okay, this is new business. It's referred to a public hearing of January 30th, 2025. It's item number 2025-066, appropriation order in the amount of $50,000 in Community Preservation Act funds for the purpose of hiring a consultant to assist with updating the town of Barnstable's open space and recreation plan.
Second.
Madam Clerk?
Counselors Ludke,
Yes.
Neary,
Yes.
Penn,
Yes.
Schnepp,
Yes.
Tamish,
Yes.
Turkelson. Yes.
Bloom,
Yes.
Burdick,
Yes.
Clark,
Yes.
Crow,
Yes.
Levesque.
Yes.
11 yes.
Thank you. Counselor Schnepp, could you introduce 67, please?
Thank you, Mr. President. Yes, this is an item of new business, a first reading, referring to a second reading on 1/30/2025. Item 2025-067, authorization of a contract with a term of up to 10 years for the management of the Conant Meaning House Farm property located in West Barnstable.
Second.
Second. Madam Clerk?
Counselors Neary,
Yes.
Penn,
Yes.
Schnepp,
Yes.
Tamish,
Yes.
Turkelson. Yes.
Bloom,
Yes.
Burdick,
Yes.
Clark,
Yes.
Crow,
Yes.
Levesque,
Yes.
Ludke.
Yes.
11 yes.
Thank you. Counselor Burdick? Could you
Thank you. This is an item of new business. It's first reading and to refer to a second reading on January 30th, 2025. Item 2025-068, authorization of a contract with a term of up to 10 years for a fixed base operator to provide management oversight services at Cape Cod Airfield in Marston's Mills.
Second.
Madam Clerk?
Counselors Penn,
Yes.
Schnepp,
Yes.
Tamish,
Yes.
Turkelson.
Yes.
Bloom,
Yes.
Burdick,
Yes.
Clark,
Yes.
Yes.
Crow, Levesque,
Yes.
Ludke,
Yes.
Neary.
Yes.
11 yes.
Thank you.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Seeing no further items, I entertain a motion to adjourn, which will also have to be a roll call vote. Second? Okay, sorry, I didn't hear you.
Second.
Counselors Schnepp,
Yes.
Tamish,
Yes.
Turkelson.
Yes.
Bloom,
Yes.
Burdick,
Yes.
Clark,
Yes.
Crow, Levesque,
Yes.
Ludke,
Yes.
Neary,
Yes.
Penn.
Yes.
11 yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night,
We are
everybody.
adjourned. Good night.